What a way to start our trip at Gigantica. We are at the Road Lake, which is the new lake at Gigantica. Totally different from the main lake. Not a drop of weed in here at all. Loads of bars, a little bit shallower as well, probably 15 to 20 foot the average depth, and loads of these fellas. There's probably 500 to 600 fish in there already, and there's another 500 going in this winter, all about this size. This is a 22 pounder, and the stock has got brilliant history. These fish have done over 70 pounds in Etang Lahore just up the road from here, so I'm sure they'll get big in here as well. But really pleased to get this one on my first night on a new lake, and we caught him on the old faithful D rig with the Banoffee hook bait that I use absolutely everywhere. And what we're going to do once we get this fella back is look at hook mechanics, because we've got a lot of people reporting back to us that they get problems with hooks, and there's no real reason why you should. And I've tied some rigs up from the most delicate to the most brutal. So if you're fishing those great big lakes with massive fish and loads of snags, I've got a rig just for you. If you're fishing rivers, same thing. Or if you're coming on places like this where you need to think about it a little bit more, then I've got a rig for you as well. So I'm going to get this fella back and show you those rigs. I'm going to start off with the rig I caught the fish on, my old faithful Iqd Rig. That's 15 pound IQ2 to a size 4 curved shank hook. I've got the bait sliding on that, and there's some buoyancy to that bait, and that's very important with this particular rig. The hook lays flat on the bottom and the boilie just hovers above it, so it hides the hook, but when it goes in, there's a nice separation between the hook and the bait, and the hook turns and catches hold really aggressively. It's very important on this rig to get the breaking strain of IQ2 and size of hook dead right, so you don't want too stiff a material because it closes up the gape of the hook. So 15 pound IQ2 to a size 4, 12 pound IQ2 to a size 6, and 10 pound IQ2 to a size 8 if you're going to use it with a size 8. And that micro rig swivel makes all the difference there, because it allows the hook to turn and catch hold without having to twist the bait as well. So very efficient rig, great for places like this that are just clear out on the bottom. There's no weed in here, most of the snags have been taken out, there's no real chance of the hook link getting cut or the fish getting snagged up, and you don't really have to pull too hard, you can just play them normally. But if situations get a bit more extreme, obviously there are ways to combat that. This is the first of those, and this incorporates the new pattern of hook called the Continental, with a K of course, and it's a very strong hook made for snaggy situations. So we've got a short shank, a fairly wide gape, a very strong bend on it, and it's slightly offset as well, and that helps the hook penetrate even more and keeps it even stronger. So a size 4 one of those with a 20mm bottom bait on there, that's just a slow sinker, so it takes away the weight of the hook. And you can see there I've extended the shank of the hook with some of our medium-sized shrink tube, and again that helps the hook flip over and catch hold and create a really secure hook hold. And if you're getting problems with hook pulls, that one little addition of having that shrink tube on there can pretty much solve it for you. And if you add that rig ring as well, you're transferring the weight of the bait onto the point of the hook, and the whole thing together turns really quickly. Now what a lot of people do wrong is they just tie a knotless knot, the hair's coming off the top of the knotless knot, they've got no shrink tube on at all, the hook doesn't turn aggressively enough, it just catches hold, and then the fish pulls out halfway in. If you add those couple of things to it, you create a much more secure hook hold. The hook is much stronger because it's embedded in the flesh, and you should have no problems at all. And moving down, that's 30 pound end trap semi-stiff, so quite a lot of stiffness, so it throws everything away from the lead. So the hook link's nice and straight. When the fish takes it, it's already straight and you hook them that bit sooner. But the breaking strain is the important thing. If you're in really snaggy or weedy situations where you have to pull really hard, there's no point having a 15 or 20 pound hook link on. Put 30 pound on, and then you know it's not going to snap on you. And that Dyneema through the middle of that end trap is absolutely indestructible. Halfway down it, I've got a medium-sized sinker on there, and that's got a bit of putty wrapped around it, and that's just to help everything lay flat on the bottom. And we've seen from the underwater filming, if you put that bit of putty halfway down or closer to the lead, then it will throw everything away. If you leave it down by the hook, which is what I used to do, the end of the hook link sinks first and the middle can be looped up. And then moving down to the swivel, you can see I've got an anti-tangle sleeve on there. Even if you're dropping this over the side of a boat, you want that anti-tangle sleeve because it throws everything away from the lead and you absolutely know it's not tangled. And of course, when you're casting, it helps to stop tangles as well. And underneath that, I've tied the M-Track semi-stiff onto a ring swivel with a Palomar knot. That is the strongest knot we've ever tested. We've got a breaking strain testing machine at work and we've tied literally thousands of knots onto swivels, and the Palomar is definitely the strongest one of the lot. So if I'm going to fish in a snaggy situation, that's probably what I'd go over to. And then the next one down is Tom Dove's favourite rig. He nicked this one off of Darryl Peck, and again incorporating the 30 pound end trap semi-stiff, knotless knotted to a size 4 choddy hook, a very, very strong pattern, thicker in the wire than a wide gape, and because it's got an outturned eye, it works really well with the stiffness right the way up. You can see I've actually tied the knot in the coated material there, and then I've got a soft hair and then a bottom bait on there, and that works absolutely perfectly. That turns and catches really quickly, brilliant for anti-tangle. And in the middle of the hook link, you can see I've got the obligatory bit of putty there, wrapped around a small sinker, and that helps push everything away from the lead. And then at the end of the hook link, I've got an anti-tangle sleeve, but this time it's pushed over a size 8 swivel rather than a ring swivel, so it throws everything away, helps the hook link to go out straight, and almost guarantees that it's never ever going to tangle. So that's Tom's favourite one, extremely strong. And then on to the next one. This is one I've dragged out my rig box from a few years ago, and this incorporates a size 4 Longshank X, probably my favourite one of the lot. Really aggressive hooking with that bit of shrink tube on the eye there, but a real brute of a hook, really, really strong. And on places like Shantyco, I've had epic battles with fish amongst snags, and this hasn't opened out at all, and they're extremely sharp as well. And you can see there the 20mm bait is coupled with a bit of pop-up maize from our new fake food range, and that basically helps to take the weight of the hook away, so it moves into the fish's mouth that little bit easier and you get a better hook hold as well. And you see a lot of my baits incorporate some kind of buoyancy, and especially when you've got a big heavy hook on the end, just by drilling the bait out and putting a little bit of cork in it, putting a little bit of pop-up maize on the top of it, that can help the hook go in a little bit further and so catch hold a little bit better. And then the hook link itself is the hybrid stiff. You can see how much stiffness there is there when I try and bend that back. That is almost like wire, that one. And then on the other end, if I can show you that, I've crimped it on. So this material is rated at 20 pound if you tie a knot in it. If you crimp it with the 0.6 crimps, the smallest one, you can get over 30 pounds breaking strain out of it. In fact, it never ever goes on the crimp. It always snaps at the hook at about 32 pound. So by using the crimps correctly, and you can only really use them on this stiff material, the hybrid stiff, and on the mouth trap material, you can get a better breaking strain than if you tied a knot. So that one again with the stiffness is pushing everything away from the lead, and that's one I choose. When I was fishing on Shantyco, I was fishing on the day area, so I was casting, only fishing about 90 to 100 yards out. That never ever tangles, and that hooks fish really quickly. And then finally, a rig for when the situation is really brutal. If you're fishing the big rivers in Europe or the great big lakes and there's loads of snags, you've got to really hit and hold, you're playing massive fish, this is what I would be using. So starting off on the hook baits, I've got two 20mm baits, but very craftily inside the top one, don't know if you can see that, but I've basically drilled that out and put one of our new 8mm cork sticks inside it, only about halfway up it, and that takes away the weight of that massive hook. So the bottom one is just a bottom bait. It's not sitting up like a snowman. It will lay on the bottom almost flat like it was two baits rolled together on the bottom, but you've got that extra bit of buoyancy and that helps the whole lot go in their mouth a little bit easier. So I've got a rig ring on there as well, That just helps the weight of the bait transfer onto the point of the hook and helps the whole rig to turn and catch hold. And you can see I've got quite a long hair there. Now these two baits are going to swell up quite a bit in the water. If you've got too short a hair, which is another reason a lot of people get hook pulls, the hook can't catch hold, the baits get in the way, you just nick the fish, and in a big battle it ends up pulling out. So a slightly longer hair with two big baits like that is what I'd recommend. It's a size 2 Continental, an absolute brute of a hook, super strong. If you open one of these out, it was probably a 200-pound catfish. You're going to land every carp you're going to hook on these. Super sharp for the size. And then I've got a bit of medium shrink tube on that, angled inwards again to help it turn over and catch hold. And then the hook link is not really a hook link at all, to be honest. It's a leader material. This is 50-pound armour cord. Absolutely indestructible stuff. You can pull this across a brick 200 times and it still isn't going to go through. And in the middle of that, again, I've got a sinker with a bit of putty around it. Really important on this one because this material floats. It's not meant to be used as a hook link, but in those sort of snaggy situations you find yourself in on the big rivers, it's brilliant. And at the end of that, again, I've got an anti-tangle sleeve to throw everything away from the lead when you're dropping it over the boat or casting it, and that just helps everything to lay out straight. And one thing I've found when you're river fishing, for some reason you need a slightly longer hook link on. I don't know if it's because you've got a tight line on and the fish struggle to get close to the hook bait, but I've found at least 10 inches, maybe 20 inches in some cases, and you will get more bites. So that's how I scale things up to combat extreme situations. There's a rig in there for pretty much every water in Europe. Use them to good effect, and I'm sure you'll be getting loads of big ones in your landing net. Great little tip for when you're baiting up quietly when the fish are already in the area is to use half baits. I've cut these ones up in the cutter. The thing I like about it is they make hardly any splash when they hit the surface, and they really splay out the catapult, so you get a big area of baiting. And I've used this to really good effect in the UK when I've been baiting up and there's been fish in the area. It's been very shallow water, and where it's been weedy as well, these flutter down and settle really well in the weed. So if you're baiting up like I am from the adjacent margin, or you're fishing close in, or you're baiting up from a boat and you want to spread the bait out, have some whole ones and some halves as well, that is a brilliant way to bait up. And the other good thing about these halves is they don't roll in the river. Now, a lot of river anglers, and they're using these all the time now because they find their way into little cracks and crevices and they don't roll down with the current. So let's put a few pouchfuls out, see if we can draw these fish back in again. What I've basically done is put the float out at the very start of the session, walked around here and lined it up with something on the far bank. Unfortunately, it lines up with a life buoy over there, a nice orange life buoy to aim at. I know roughly the distance out from the bank, and I'm just spraying these all over the area. And if you do this in your own fishing, every time you get a bite, if you put a few more handfuls of chops out, you can really create competitive feeding because the fish are drawn in by the sound of the bait, and it's not too startling for them. It's almost like particle fishing with boilies, and you can get really good results on this by just keeping the bait going in. A lot of people, especially on holiday venues, they bait up once a day and that's it. And the fish come in, eat most of the bait almost straight away, and they're sitting there with no bait all day. So every time you get a bite, put a few more chops in the swim, and you can turn a good week into a brilliant one.